Hey everyone! Before we jump into the video, I just wanted to let you know that this video is being brought to you by my Patreon. So this month, October, marks my 1-year anniversary of having a Patreon page. So as a thank you to my patrons and all the people who may be signing up, I wanted to give you guys a little bit extra this month. For my lowest tier, which is only $3 Canadian a month, you get all my YouTube videos ad-free, a day early, as well as an exclusive Patreon tutorial. But this month, you're going to be getting 2 tutorials. For my next tier up, the live stream tier, you usually get 1 live stream, and this month you are getting 2. And then my 3rd tier up, which is the all access tier, I'm going to be giving out as many tracing pages, coloring pages, digital artwork that I can. I just wanted to say thank you to my supporters for everything we've been through. Honestly, I wouldn't be able to do this without you. So this is my way of saying thank you for the past year. So if you've been on the fence about joining my Patreon, this is the month to do it. Because not only are you going to be getting the extras from this month, for whatever tier you have signed up for, you're going to be getting all the previous perks from the past year. That's it. Let's jump into the video, but make sure to check out my Patreon link down below and see if anything there interests you. Let's get into it. Hey friends, welcome back to another Monday Morning Watercolor Tips. My name is Emma LaFave, and here on this channel on Monday mornings, I give you some quick watercolor tips to set you off on the right foot for the week. So today's watercolor tip, we are talking all about hard edges and blooms. Do you ever find that you're trying to paint maybe leaves or florals, and then the paint just seems to get darker around the edges, or you have these weird like water bloom marks on your page that you did not intend for them to be there? Well, today I'm going to tell you why that happens, how to prevent them, and how to use them intentionally in your work. Let's get started. Okay, so today we are talking all about blooms and hard edges. If your work has ever looked like this, join the club. It happens to all of us. Now, the reason for this is all about water control. Water control, water control, water control. And I do have a bunch of videos on this, but I am going to touch on how this happens or why this happens and how to fix it, and then how to use it intentionally in your work. Okay, so water control. The reason why this happens is because the area that you're painting is drying at a different rate. These areas where it looks like it's a bit lighter, or you're getting these actual kind of like circles or what we call blooms, those areas are telling you that there was more water there and it was drying slower than the area that's next to it. Clean water actually repels pigment. And I'm going to show you how to use that intentionally in a little bit. But when we're doing a painting and we have an area that's pooling, so an area that just has a bit more water than the rest of it, it dries at a slower rate. So this will dry first, and water and watercolor wants to move wherever there's water. So if it's started to dry here and it's still wet, it's going to stay here and it's going to start creating this edge. So that's our issue. It's all about water control. Now, there are a couple ways on how you can fix this and how to prevent it. And one of them is better quality paper. So this is my Etcher Lab cold press watercolor sketchbook. I love it. I think it's great paper, but as you can see, I can obviously create these blooms quite easily on it. Having it be 100% cotton definitely helps because it helps the water and the paint soak into it a little bit easier, which prevents these blooms. But in order for me to create these to show you, I had to add a significant amount of water. So one, using better quality paper, like a 100% cotton paper, will help the water soak in at the same rate as the rest of it, if that makes sense. When you're working with a cheaper like cellulose paper that isn't as absorbent, you're going to get areas where they pool, and then you're most likely going to get little blooms and hard edges like this. But even with cheaper paper, you can make it work. It's all about dispersing your water evenly throughout your painting. So I'm going to quickly show you how to do that. So usually our problem, first I'm going to show you what the problem is and how we kind of get here. Let's say we're doing a leaf, okay? And you're following my pressure stroke of light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure, okay? So I'm telling you, you got to do the light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure. Now there's a lot of times when we lift up our brush, there's going to be an inconsistency in the placement of the water. You can already see here where it's lighter, there's not as much water, and where it's darker, there's more water. And you can actually see before our eyes right now that there's this line starting to form. That is because it is starting to dry here faster and it's still wet here, and it's going to create that separation. We want it to be the same amount of wetness over the whole leaf. So in order to do that, instead of just doing your one single stroke of light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure, see, you get a pool there, starts drying here, all you have to do is go back over with the tip of your brush and just move that pigment around. Move the water and the pigment around. Same thing as here. Okay, you want to make sure that it is all the same amount of wetness. Now, if I'm moving this and I'm still getting a pool here, see how it's darker here? This is going to dry at a different rate and it's going to cause one of these bloom marks. If there's just too much water and pigment there, all you have to do, dry your brush off on your paper towel and then again move it around to get rid of it. Okay, dry your brush off and you're just lifting that color. The bristles in your brush will absorb the paint and the water. It will help lift it off. And then you have an even amount. And this works on cheaper paper too. It may be a bit more difficult to evenly disperse the water because typically with the cheaper paper, the water tends to sit on top rather than to soak in. So it's harder to kind of avoid those pooling areas, but it is possible. You're just going to need to lift more of that paint and water with your brush. And honestly, that's all there is to it. Now, while I tell you to do your leaf strokes of the light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure, you don't just have to leave it at that. You can always go back over your work to make sure that water is dispersed evenly. Now, another issue that we run into is usually when we're adding in a shadow. So we have this flat color here and we want to add in some darker color. Now, the tricky part with this here, so I'm going to show you, I have a bigger brush, I have water on my brush, I go back into my color, okay? And the tricky part that we run into is that we dab it in one area and the color is moving, but I also added a bunch more water, which again is going to create that issue of having this area a bit more dry, this more wet, and it's going to create that bloom mark. So what you want to do is make sure that before you go in with your shadow, the area that you are about to go into is still wet. Okay, so I'm just going over it. I'm picking up some of that water. And then don't add any excess water onto your brush. Now, it's so hard to tell you how much water you need on your brush without actually feeling it because I can't really explain it. I have to feel it and you have to feel it out for yourself. But you don't want it dripping. You don't want it to be heavy with water. So if you feel like your brush is damp enough, you can go right into your wet color, grab a little bit of that paint and tap it in. And the paint that you just added there is going to be the same amount of wetness as the whole leaf. Here, we're going to see that issue where this is going to start to dry first, and this is going to be a bit more wet because I had more water and paint on my brush when I added it. So when you're going back in to add shadows, doing some wet on wet, you just want to make sure you don't have a lot of water and paint on your brush. You want to make sure it's the same amount that is already on the paper. Now, I know that concept is like really tricky, but again, it's just something you have to feel for yourself and practice. Try with different amounts of water on your brush and just do like a page of leaves doing this technique and see what works and see what doesn't. Take notice of how much water's on your brush, how much paint you're picking up, and just learn from the feel of it. I can tell you over and over and over again, but you're not going to get it until you feel it for yourself. So that is the reason why this happens. Now let me give you a little glimpse onto how you can use this issue intentionally. And the one way that I really like to use it is in water. So when I'm painting water, what I'll do is, let's just get some blue here, okay? Now this pink square, I made a mistake earlier, so that's why that's there. It's not anything special, okay? So I'm doing some blue here, and pretend this is like an ocean or something. And what I actually like to do is I will wash off my brush. I won't have it dripping, like this is way too wet. I'm gonna run it against the side, but it's still a little bit wet, and I'm just gonna drop in some clean water And see how that clean water is pushing away the pigment, creating these lighter lines? That's essentially what's happening here, and that's the issue. But if we intentionally put it there, it can look like waves, which is really cool. There's that way you can do it. And sometimes what I do when I'm making like a flower field, let me get some green. Okay, say this is like a flower field, this little square green. What I like to do, or even if you're doing like a sky, a starry night, what you can do, just gonna try and move it around evenly, wash off my brush, is I will take my brush with clean water. It's not dripping, but there is water on it. And I will just tap it gently and see those little water marks. It almost looks like those dandelion before they're yellow, the little fluffs. Okay. And it looks like this kind of like magical, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but you know what I mean? Like these little marks, and it just gives a really nice little texture to your work. So there is a way you can use this issue intentionally to make your work have a bit more texture and make it a bit more interesting. So honestly, don't fret when this happens. It's all about dispersing your water and your paint evenly. It is something to be practiced and something that I still have trouble with at times. I'm telling you, watch the bouquet video. It's coming out later this week. You'll see how I did it and how I fixed it. Actually, I'll show you quickly how to fix it here with this leaf. So say here, I'm starting to get those lines and I realize, this is drying before this. I don't like that. What you can do while this is still wet, this wet part, you're just going to take this color, you're going to go back over the whole thing, move the water around, disperse it evenly. It's still a bit too wet, still a bit too much on the wet side. So I'm just going to dry off my brush. Again, we're doing that flat color. Then next time I go back in with my darker color, less water, and I tap it in. And there we go. It's fixed. Okay. And you'll see how I do that with the flower in the bouquet video. But that's about it. So again, don't stress. It happens to all of us. It's just something to be practiced, and you've totally got this. Thank you guys so much for watching my video. I really hope you liked it, and I hope you learned something. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and follow me on Instagram for even more, and Facebook, and all the other platforms. Just look in the description below and you can just follow me over there. Have a great day, guys. Bye.